You know, when you think of journalists dying in the line of duty,
running gun battles,
you probably assume most are war correspondents.
And that's why we've come running down to the shelter.
Well, not exactly. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, since 1992, more than 730 have died doing their jobs. Nearly 3/4 of them were murdered. And 85% of those journalists were working to expose corruption or wrongdoing in their own countries. You want another shocking stat? In nearly 90% of cases, the killers have gone unpunished. Clearly, working as a journalist in certain parts of the world can be a deadly business. So, why would somebody want to do it? Well, that's where Terry Gould comes in. Terry's an investigative journalist based in Vancouver, and he's not afraid of dangerous stories. Back in 1990, he did a report for the CBC about Vancouver triad mobster Stephen Wong.
An initiated official in one of the largest Chinese mafia organizations in the world.
Terry tracked Wong around the world for years and throughout the shady underworld. He ended up writing a book about it called Paper Fan. Now, Gould's got another book. His latest is called Murder Without Borders. Over several years, he traveled to 5 of the world's deadliest countries for reporters: Iraq, the Philippines, Russia, Colombia, and Bangladesh. Terry profiled 7 reporters who made the ultimate sacrifice to expose the truth. Everybody, please say hi to Terry Gould. How are you? You're obviously a journalist in your own right, but what got you onto this story to talk about the journalists who've died covering their stories?
When I was chasing Stephen Wong in the Philippines, there were a lot of journalists murdered. None of the masterminds were brought to justice, like 22 in a few years.
And you never hear about those stories either, do you?
Oh, you don't, because they're in faraway places and they're never covered overseas. And in 2005, the Committee to Protect Journalists came up with the 5 most dangerous murderous countries for journalists. And there were Colombia, the Philippines, Iraq, Russia, and Bangladesh. So I was determined to find out what was in the heart of these journalists that imbued them with this psychology of sacrifice, that they were willing to die for a story, to go all the way, even though they were threatened, they knew they would die. Mm-hmm. And they only made a few $100s a month. What was it inside them that drove them forward right up to the brink and then over the edge and into the arms of death? So I chose representative cases in these 5 countries and went to their hometowns and interviewed everybody around them and to get to the core of who they were.
Was there a thread? Was there a common thread that was kind of woven?
Yes, there was.
What was
and I think anybody can relate to that. And the thread was that they were dying for their town. They reported and lived in the town that they were killed in. So they lived and died to help and save the people in their own town. And most people can relate to that. Mm-hmm. What differentiates them and makes them a separate breed is that 3 or 4 or 20 of their other colleagues in Iraq or Bangladesh or the Philippines, the town where they lived, had been killed before them. So it's like a platoon of soldiers charging across the field. The man carrying the flag goes down. Everyone in that platoon knows, I may get shot, but if I pick that flag up and pull the rest of us, I will get shot. Yeah. Yet these journalists, they grabbed up that flag and they held it high and they knew they'd go down, but that by going down, they would demonstrate the type of courage that would drive the people behind them forward and to higher ground.
You know, there's obviously lots of journalists who have died, but like I said, you picked a certain group of people. I wonder in a human's life when they're getting ready to make an ultimate sacrifice, oftentimes something has to happen in their life because it's not just protecting their town. They have to experience something, witness something. Did you find that these people had turning point moments in their life?
Every one of them had a transformational moment, early in their lives or early in their careers. And it wasn't only something they'd witnessed or that had happened to them, but sometimes something they had done to others. In a case of a Colombian journalist, he'd murdered somebody when he was 22 and drunk in a bar. In the case of a Philippine journalist, Marlene Esprat, she'd had a religious experience that said that when she died, it would be like Christ dying. Her death would elevate the story she was writing to the masses so that they would suddenly learn the news that she wanted to get out. She wrote in a very remote town. And indeed, when she was murdered, that is exactly what happened. In Bangladesh, he was a man by the name of Manik Saha was the closest thing to a human saint I'd ever encountered, and I feel I did encounter him just by talking to everybody around him. And he was an atheist. He had no reward in the hereafter. For him, he died for the people in this town that was dominated by the Bengal mafia and jihadists. crazy people that would do anything to further their own ends. Maoist rebels, he exposed them, and he was threatened. As all these journalists were threatened, he predicted his own death, as all these journalists have predicted their death, and they were killed.
Mm-hmm. What's neat about all those people you mentioned is those people, the murderers, they don't sit at the table of world leaders. They are gangsters, a lot of them. However, one of the stories in this case deals directly with Russia. And all of our leaders in this country, they deal with Vladimir Putin, and everybody knows that if you are highly critical of Vladimir Putin, there is no guarantee of safety. Yeah. So this is a guy that is supposedly a progressive democratic world leader, supposedly, but even he is been accused of being a part of this.
These are nations, all these nations are run according to the principle of organized crime, which means the political leader is a gang boss, just like a gangster. Yeah. And he appoints his subordinates to the bureaucracy and the officialdom, and in return for kicking some upstairs, they're allowed to do whatever they want. So basically, they know their salaries are low, but their incomes are high, and that they are granted impunity in return for supporting the chief and paying the chief off. And in every one of these countries, they're run according to that principle. So if you cross any one of these officials, they can kill you, and nothing will happen to them. And they know that.
And so you've got Vladimir Putin, who is a world leader.
Yeah, and Vladimir Putin doesn't have to say, kill that guy. He just is sitting at a table and says, I don't like that guy. That's all he says. I don't like that guy. And his assistant hears, and then the assistant hears that, and pretty far down the road, the police hear, and they say, okay, I know a gangster that'll kill that guy. And then they kill the journalist, and maybe they catch a real criminal, but so far down that has no effect on the big boss.
Unlike a complete and utter outsider, not that you live with Vladimir Putin, but your grandfather used to work for Bugsy Siegel. Well, Benny Siegel.
Yeah, he would. My grandfather worked for Bugsy Siegel's boss.
Bugsy was boss, yeah.
Arnold Rothstein.
Arnold Rothstein's the guy that helped throw the 1919 Black Sox scandal.
Yeah, for the World Series, right.
Your grandfather worked with that dude.
Yeah, he was a wheelman.
He was the wheelman?
Yeah.
Even better.
Even better. Sam Bronfman in Canada used to run booze during Prohibition. My grandfather used to drive it down in New York City. And then guys below my grandfather were like Ben Siegel. Yeah. In my house, my dad would never say Bugsy because Bugsy when he
didn't like that. But Meyer Lansky was part of that crew too, right?
Meyer Lansky organized the books for the Jewish mafia and the Italian mafia.
Did you feel like you were growing up in a family that had organized crime connections?
My dad went straight when he got into his 20s, but he always knew somebody. So, when I got my first girlfriend pregnant and having an abortion meant making a pact with the devil, my dad knew the devil to phone. When I only had...
Your dad made that call?
He made that call. When I had only $600 scholarship money to buy a car, let me call Johnny. So next day I had a car with only 10,000 on the odometer. And when I was under police protection because of Stephen Wong, the issue, and the police were living in the house, my dad came out to Vancouver with my mom. He walks in the house and he says, Terry, I wish I knew someone on the coast here. So my mom just hit the ceiling. She says, always with a know somebody. He doesn't need to know anybody. He knows the police. So, later on that took me to the fact, you're right. I knew the police. In Canada, we don't have to worry when we're under police protection that the police are going to take a bribe from the Chinese mafia and come upstairs and shoot you in the head.
But in another country, that would have happened.
That's the way it works.
Yeah.
They're always killed by the government or the police in cahoots with the government. It always happens that way. We don't worry about that here. Journalists do get killed in the West, but it hardly ever does have any connection to officialdom.
Do you think that, aside from the one story you told, oftentimes these countries do this because they can get away with this? In the Philippines, they can kill dozens of people, and it does go away. Do you get a sense that in this era it's getting better? People are more aware of it?
People are aware, but these murders come in what's called a sinusoidal curve. There are a lot of murders. Journalists get really scared, and they self-censor, and then the murders go down. Then they get their courage back, and the murders go up again. These countries, they shift around in the 5, 10 most dangerous countries, but they're always usually the same. And don't forget, millions of square miles are controlled according to this principle of organized crime. Billions of people live under that system. And they can't say anything because the people who don't like being criticized have the right to kill them based on the fact that they're allied with the gang boss who happens to be the political leader.
If you want to hear these really interesting stories about these people and what they went through, the book is called Murder Without Borders, written by Terry Gould. Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you.
Terry Gould, everybody. All right, when we come back, we're going to change the tone of one of the world's legendary magicians passes by. Ricky Jay is next.